In this segment, we're going to be talking about what types of learning avenues are used to teach history and culture with Winter Promise. We have so many different learning avenues, and so many of them are used with our history and culture themes. Our history and culture themes are really just rich with information, and so we seek to present those in just a variety of ways. One of these ways is with our journaling. Our journaling is a rich, exciting way for students to learn history. When we put together our journaling pages, we seek to have each page approach a specific topic. Usually it's a topic that at least has been introduced in other resources, and then the student gets to kind of feedback, perhaps learn a little bit more about a topic, and then do something on that page that shows what they know. So there's an aspect of it that it's repetition, but it's also reinforcement of what they've learned. Now, the journaling pages themselves are, they're just so interactive. That's one of the things we love about Winter Promise, and you'll actually be finding out more about that on a separate video. So I'm going to try to keep it short here, but give you a little taste of what the journaling is like, because that is a separate video. But for now, let me just tell you that our journaling pages can be interactive in a variety of ways. We have fold-out historical maps. In our Sea and Sky, if you encounter that one, there's layover maps that build one on the other, that you flip them up like little windows and take a look at those historical maps. We have cutouts of trade products used throughout the Middle Ages that are pasted in place either on maps or in a diagram that shows the relationship of those products one to another and where they came from. You might make a trip list of what you need to go on a journey with Lewis and Clark and decide what to take and what not to take. And those are all graphically represented, so it's very engaging for the student. You might try deciphering Viking runes, which are the little characters that we see on old Viking archaeological objects. So their form of language. You can decipher those. And maybe you'll measure out the Mayflower's room. How much room was on board the Mayflower? We have our students in one notebook exercise, actually, they tape it out on the floor and then they report on just exactly how it felt to be in that confined space if you had that the number of people that there were supposed to be aboard the Mayflower. So there's all sorts of different interactive experiences that not only will reinforce what they already know, but in some cases will actually go beyond and introduce a topic that has never been introduced before, but is kind of a side bunny trail that will excite students so that it adds something to what's presented in the other resources. So that's our little highlights of how our journaling teaches history and culture. When we think about our notebooking, that's another way we teach the history and culture in our themes. Notebooking, we consider all of the parts that go into our timeline. Now, Winter Promise has a timeline that really is like no other. It's loose leaf so that you can file things in between the pages. This is done by each spread having a printed side and having a blank side, so that when you flip the page, the blank side that comes after it is available for you to file things like student reports or artwork or other things that you've created as far as with your notebooking. You can put notebooking pages right in there, or maps that you've done throughout the year that support your history studies. So those are all great things to put into the timeline. The timeline also has on each spread a list of all of the important historical events that are related to the certain period of time that spread or pages cover. Usually at the top, there's a little banner about kind of what era it is, whether it's the World War II era or, say, the Age of Exploration. And then down at the bottom, there's kind of a ticker of different major events that are going on at that time period during those dates. You use that timeline, of course, to put timeline figures in. Winter Promise offers a couple different kinds of timeline figures, and those can be cut out and placed in that timeline book so that you can kind of really graphically see Well, when did all the adventurers and explorers go to sea during the Age of Exploration? And who began it all? At a glance, you can tell who kind of set everything on course to do that. And so that you can see kind of the unfolding of an era through these timeline figures. Another aspect of our notebooking are our timeline cards. Our timeline cards focus on usually most of the major events that go into our timeline book. So that in your guidebook with a themed or historical program, a cultural program, you're going to get 100 timeline cards around the 100 most important dates or the things that happened that were influential during that time period. When you open up your guidebook, you can copy those onto cardstock, cut them apart. There's 8 to a page. And then on one side, there is the actual name of the event. On the other side is the date of the event and the importance of an event. Now, these can be used not only as flashcards to learn these dates, but in games that we actually have right in our guidebook. Each historically themed guidebook gives you those fun games, Jeopardy or timeline spelling or all sorts of different games. We have lots of different games in there, ideas for you that you use to review and learn your timeline cards. This is part of trying to overcome one of those negatives of the literature approach. Many people will say, well, in the literature approach, one of the things that kids don't come out with is a hard knowledge of specifics that they can tell you that they've learned. And while that might be somewhat true, and certainly true of some programs that rely on only one learning method, such as just, reading historical books, with these timeline cards, students will come out with a hard knowledge of the date, the event and what era it happened in, and also the importance of that date and that event in history, how it affected history. So that's one of the ways that Winter Promise is overcoming the maybe downside of one approach by giving you something that's another learning avenue to help you overcome that. So that's a really cool thing. And as you go along, the kids accumulate more of those cards that they know. And therefore, by the end of the year, you're really getting into some rip-roaring games because you've got 100 of those dates to work with to run alongside almost any learning game you'd like.